Welcome to video 3 in the Boomerang Atom Assembly series. The focus of this video is wings. We are going to jump back and forth a little bit as we get some stuff done in the fuselage, but we're going to be completing the wings in this video. All right, last video we kind of finished up with some gluing. So we got our front battery holders glued, we got our XT60 holders glued, and we also got some of our tank stuff done. So the tanks have been, the tank and tray have been clear coated with 2K clear. I did that earlier this morning, so they're already hardened up. And our glue on the underside here on our tabs is all cured as well too. So I'm thinking about how to mount this tank. Now I don't want to be using a Velcro strap around this because it's ugly. And I was thinking, because we made these phenomenal little tabs here, what I can do is I can have another piece of wood coming like this. If you imagine something like this fastened to the bottom, and then what happens is this interlocks with our back part of our tank tray right there. So as long as we have a piece of wood that's roughly the same thickness as this tray wood, what's going to happen is you tuck the tank in, that's going to sit underneath, and then all we need to do is come up with a front mount that is glued to the tank. So when the tank drops in, we can reach a screw through here and fasten it to the tray itself. So that's going to be the way we do our invisible tank mount, and I'm happy with how this thing turned out. We also have to pressure test this thing as well too, so we'll make sure we get that done, but looks really good. Nice and shiny finish on the tank and the tray. All right, so we've got our wings laid out on our bench here, and we've got all of our trays off, our hatch covers off. Nice hatch covers, impressed with this. They're all carbon fiber, they're all pre-drilled. The nice thing is our servos are also mounting to these surfaces, which is great. That makes for basically doing everything much easier. I was just figuring out the path for our wires. So we've got a pre-opened connector hole here, and if you run the leads through there, you can see there's this little channel by the gear. So our wire leads are going to come this way underneath the gear, feeding our flaps, and then over feeding our aileron. So nice simple path for the wires, no reason to do anything else. And this just makes for a nice location to have our wires come through. So that's the plan there. I'm going to get our wiring harness made up, and that's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'll be using a 12-pin ashlock connector, which I'm just going to confirm fits in this area. And we also want to confirm that it fits through our fuselage opening. We can make that a little bit wider if needed, but yeah, that's where we're going to have the wires coming out. All right, so here's the 12 pin that we're going to be using, and it doesn't fit in the wing side. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this sticking out of the wing, probably the clip side actually, so this side here, which I call the male side. So we'll have this sticking out of the wing, and then the female side will be in the fuselage. Now we want to be able to tuck these into the fuselage so that that's where our wire is going to be stored. So what that means is we need to open the fuselage up just a little bit as far as centimeters or millimeters go. Probably open this up 5 millimeters, so not much at all. And we don't want to go forward. There's a former right here, so you can feel it on the tip of my finger. So we're just going to open that up just a little bit, and then when we put the wings on, the excess clip or the clip is going to tuck into the fuselage. All right, so we've got all of our wire leads cut here. So obviously we've got 2 of each size, 1 for each wing. We've got flap, aileron. The shorter one is for gear and the longer one is for brakes. So the path that I figured out here for the brakes, the lead's going to come down the leg, go underneath the landing gear, and then we'll have a connector like a power box or standard servo connector in this area. So the reason to put those connectors in is if you ever need to take your gear out, there's a separation point there, right? If you just take this lead, run it all the way to the wing connector, then if you have to take this gear out, you've got to cut it and then add that splice later on. So why not just do it now? So I'm going to get this side of the connector done. We'll get a little piece of snakeskin installed on there. The reason for the snakeskin is basically where it's touching this fiberglass and where it's rubbing against the wheel well cover here. This is also fiberglass and it's fairly rough. So we want that to be protected till it gets to this point right here. All right, so we've got one of our harnesses done up here, labeled on the root of the wing. The snakeskin basically comes to this location right here. So that's all labeled, all ready to go. So we've installed our wire into the root of our wing. We'll get this hooked up and routed to the flap opening. All right, so we've got our wire lead all installed, put a couple of plastic clips in there to hold everything. So we've got our flap, all of our leads come to this point, our aileron is there, the gear and the brake lines come to here. We could run the brake and gear lines the same length, but the brake one I made a little bit longer, but those guys are right there. And then as far as the actual gear goes, you can see how much we left on the back of the gear, which plugs in right there. And then the brakes left basically to the base plus about 8 inches. What I'm doing now is I'm sanding a couple little spots, 4 actually, on the gear and installing my little wire keepers. These I just print with my 3D printer, and as long as you roughen up the gear and use CA to glue them in place, they stick very well. So what I'll do is get these glued in place, run the wire through, and then we'll put our connector on that end. All right, so we got our gear installed, plugged in. Haven't put CA in the screws yet. Just going to check and make sure that this actually works, which is key. So we've got the root of the wing here, the Ashlock connectors plugged into our Electron gear controller. So we are going to make these things work. There we go. That looks good. I'm happy with the brake line there. That routes well. It tucks out of the way when the gear retracts. Nice. That's awesome. There's also cover plate on there as well too. That is beautiful because it covers everything. You've got a lot of options here as far as position goes because there's so much room in the cover plate. So really no issue where your gear needs to be installed. So that is awesome. Happy with that. All we did was just center that in the wheel well opening, of course, and that gets a thumbs up. Works very well. So now what I'll do is I'll take each one of these screws out. We'll put some thin CA in there and then screw them back down. All right, so just getting our servos set up here. Now our spacing's a little bit wonky on these the servo hatches. So if you look here, we've got kind of the servo roughly installed, and we've got a decent space there in between the arm and the servo itself. So if we use the rubbers on the servo, that would space it out a little bit, but not enough to compensate. So what we're doing is we're going to be using some of my wood pieces that I cut out on my laser cutter, and these are servo spacers. Now these won't work in this situation in the stock format, so we need to basically cut them here and just use the wood spacer. Now we'll harden these up with some CA, some thin CA, but this is what we're going to be spacing those servos out with. And then as far as the actual spacing goes, these are, I think, 3.9 millimeters or something like that, 3.92, whatever that equates to in imperial size, but you can see there our spacing between the arm and the servo hatch. So those should work out good. I'm not a fan of using the rubbers and the little washers and stuff on jets. I want it to be a rigid mounting. And then obviously you can see here what we need to cut off to make that spacer work. So basically just get rid of the cross pieces and just use the end tabs. All right, so here is a final servo ready to install. So you can see our wood spacers there. I've hardened those up with CA. We've got a little bit of a gap on our arm to plate there, enough that it's not going to interfere with anything. And then we've got a zip tie bundling up our servo lead. So this is ready to install. And I'm always questioning whether this fits in the stock opening. In the online manual for this aircraft, it does talk about opening the flap pocket a little bit, so we'll see how that works out. But this one, let's see. Yeah, that's going to fit perfect. No issues there at all. That's great. I'm going to put some keeper material on our servo lead. Now, I've been using shrink tube for a long time. I'm fine with shrink tube. What I'll use sometimes is aluminum foil tape, like the actual duct tape material. I like it because it holds really well. I usually cut it a little bit longer than my servo connector. And the other thing that is important with it is it's serviceable. And when I say that, I mean it's serviceable a little bit safer than the shrink tube. So I'll do this one with foil tape, and maybe I'll do the other one with foil tape, but basically I just cut a piece like this from the roll. Now I'm happy with both. The problem with the shrink tube is that if you ever have to take the servo off, you got to take an X-Acto blade and slice that. And I've cut myself a number of times doing that process, and it's not a lot of fun. So always looking for ways to make things a little bit better. Not that you're taking out servos on a regular basis, but so anyways, we'll do this with the foil tape. So I just get that overlapping on both ends and make it nice and tight. Just like that. Give it a squish down on the faces, give it a squish down on the ends. And then the other thing you can do is when you squish those ends, that completely encapsulates the servo end. So now there's no way that's going to come apart. But if you do need to take it apart, you can just grab both ends and just yank, and it will come apart. So it's kind of I think, a decent little solution. So anyways, we're going to get that screwed down now, and then we'll work on our aileron linkage. Now keep in mind with the ashlock connectors on the end, I love using these because now all we need to do is plug that servo connection in the aileron servo, paying attention to polarity, and we can operate our aileron servo and get that centered and everything without having to have the connection accessible. All right, so aileron on the first one is all set up. Works great. There's no issues with that at all. I think it's awesome. Good setup. And we get lots of travel on there. So I can't remember what the specific travel is, but I like it. I think it works out good. So anyways, we're going to get our flaps set up now. Now when I'm doing the flaps, what I like to do is have both of my wings side by side, or my flap servos side by side, so we can get them set up in the radio matching and be all matchy-matchy. So I'm going to get that stuff kind of set up. The bench is a disaster right now, but we'll get that set up and we'll take a look at the flap servos. All right, so we got both of our flap servos set up here. We're using some bad Mamma Jamma servo arms just because they fit really well on these guys. And we're also decided to use the KST brushless X2075-12s for servos on the flaps. Way overkill. This is an insane servo. It's like 92 kilograms of force, but the reason I went with this is I've got some extras. And the other thing is, on a flap setup like this, there is no mechanical lock on full flap. So when this is on full flap, the servo is taking all of the force. It's not like other sports jets where you get a mechanical lock at full flap. So keep that in mind. That's why I went with a bigger servo instead of like the 599 SLs. But there is flap off, normal flying mode, takeoff, and full flaps. Now the other ones, it doesn't really matter where they are right now. All I care about is the normal flying mode setup so we can get our linkage done, and then the other ones we can program in the radio, and we're doing that in our flap menus. So when we go fine tuning, butterfly flap menu, here's our flap setup. So gives you an idea of what we're looking at. We don't use any of that stuff. Aileron adjustments, aileron flap adjustments, sorry. You can see there how we've got things set up. All right, now the manual shows a couple cutouts and stuff. Obviously test fit your servo beforehand, because this servo just dropped right in, no problem. There's not a lot of room, but it fits in there, no problem. Yes, when I did up my fasteners, we did a little bit of green paint damage, but that fits great. So no issues there at all. So perfect. So we'll get our servo lead installed, we'll get this guy screwed in place, and then we'll work on our linkage setup. The other thing that I just kind of noticed about this, this wing is a lot of wings there is a definite stop at flap off or 0 flaps. This one actually has some movement up beyond the 0 flap location. So what that means is you're not going to have a hard stop, and usually that causes the servo to buzz. So it's kind of a nice thing. I guess you could also use that as movement if you really wanted to. There is 0, so you have about 10 millimeters of up movement on that flap available. All right, so first wing is complete, and happy with everything. It turned out good. Flap travel, there's our available flap travel that we can get. So a decent amount of angle, like probably 65 degrees, something like that. So I think the manual calls for, I would assume it doesn't say where, but I would assume the measurement is here. So it says 30 millimeters for takeoff, 50 for landing. So we'll be able to get way more than that. So anyways, now what we do is we're just repeating that exact same stuff on wing number 2. All right, so wings are both complete, and those are very straightforward, really no issues with the wings. They're quite simple. Yeah, it goes together quite well. I think there's a little bit, on my kit anyways, there's a little bit of interference at the root of the flap. So when I install this wing onto the fuselage, it looks like we have to do a little bit of sanding right here, and possibly on this one. This one kind of bumps out a little bit. So I'm going to check that out. I'll show you guys, but that's pretty simple stuff to take care of, and I believe that's all wood balsa in there. So when we do sand that down, we'll be able just to touch it up with white, and that'll be basically disappear. So pretty much used all the normal stuff. Nothing really, nothing special. Just straightforward, simple wings. All right, with the wings completed, we tucked them aside, and we're going back to the fuselage here and kind of random things. So we drilled out the hole in our tank and got the fitting mounted for the vent. Now, part of the reason I put it where I did was because when I was working on this tank, I had it flipped over and I put a little nick in the black, and that actually worked out good, because when we do our tank vent line, I like to go around in a circle and then out of the fuselage. That makes sure that when you're doing aerobatics, you're not having fuel coming out of the vent line. So it's very helpful to do that. So anyways, that worked out good. Happy with that, totally fine with it. And I think the other thing we can do now is, since we got the gear mounted in our wings, we can also mount the front gear in our fuselage. Now, I'm going to hook up our gear controller to this, and just make sure that we're centered in the opening when I do this. And while we've got the gear out, I'm probably going to get my Velcro straps installed behind my battery holders to eliminate the need to do that later on. All right, and to give you an idea of what the batteries are going to look like, they're sitting in there. There's nothing holding them in other than just the angle of the battery holders. So those are perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Keeps them out of the way of the gear, nice and compact. Works well. I like it. All right, so we got our front gear just laid in place. The screws, the blind nuts are already done for you, which makes it super simple. So I just put my 4 fasteners in place. There's a little bit of play once those fasteners are in, but not much. But what we're looking to do is just make sure that this gets centered in the wheel opening. So we can skew it off to one side like that, but we're looking to have that centered. So I'm just going to hold this to the side a little bit, tighten it down. I haven't put any Loctite on those guys yet, so I'm going to get it fastened in place, and then we'll take each fastener out and put Loctite on it. And we've got our gear controller here, our manual controller hooked up so we can confirm that everything works. Very nice setup, works really well, lots of clearance and everything, no issues. I see the leg is just touching the back of that opening, and I noticed that because it skewed the gear a little bit. So we'll do a little bit of Dremel work right there, but otherwise looks good. All right, so we took a couple millimeters off in like a little semicircle shape there on the opening. Gears all screwed down. We did add washers underneath those fasteners, just, I don't know, just because it seems like the thing to do. And here is the landing gear. So servo's plugged in as well. And we didn't need very much, but we've got a decent amount of clearance there between the leg and the fuselage, and everything works very well. So that's awesome. I like this gear setup. This works really well. There's a few jets out there using this style of landing gear, and makes for a very simple installation. I like the fact that there's actually the blind nuts already installed, and yeah, easy peasy. All right, guys, first two videos were definitely a little bit of a long stretch, so we're gonna cut the video 3 off a little bit shorter at more of a reasonable time. We made some great progress in this video. We got our wings completed, which is awesome, and everything went together very, very well. Not sure if we're gonna wrap this plane up in the next video, but the next video, video 4, we're gonna start off and continue with all the detailed stuff of the aircraft. So we're gonna get into some, I guess, keep it more detailed, keep things a little bit more intricate as we go through this aircraft. So thanks guys so much for watching. Also encourage you to check out the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. The After Dark is a completely separate channel for us where we do our live streams here from the shop. During the winter, we generally do it every 2 weeks for about 1-ish hours. Usually Saturday evening is when we do it, our time, and that's tons of fun. Cool thing about the live is if you're on during the live, you get to interact with us, ask us questions, we answer them in real time. It's a blast. So, and you also get to see some behind the scenes stuff. Also want to give a shout out to channel members. Woo. Thank you so much, channel members, for supporting the channel. If you're not sure what a channel member is, channel members are, it's a paid thing, but channel members get early access to our videos. So as an example, video 1, video 2, this video is all uploaded to YouTube early, and channel members get early access to those videos. Normally, we're about 1 to 2 weeks ahead on videos uploaded to YouTube. So that's what channel membership is. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.